I'm in a particularly good mood this evening because I've just been reading the Senate inquiry, the Australian Senate inquiry into misinformation and disinformation in climate, where they're basically making claims that people like me are in the pay of the big oil industry and they've got to find out why. And the reason I'm so happy about it is it's quite obvious that they're running scared. They can just see how effective we've been. So we can see here, this is the parliamentary inquiry, and there's about 150 submissions, and there's a whole bunch from universities, and you'd be surprised to know that all of the university ones are going on about how the Murdoch media and the big oil companies and fossil fuel companies are paying people like me, and this is the reason why so many people don't believe the climate is a catastrophe. So the first one I'm going to look at, we're going to look at just a couple to give you a flavour. This one here from the McGill University, Canada, Centre for Media Technology and Democracy. And you can see it in this one here where they've actually done some surveying of people's attitudes to climate change. And this is where you can see how scared they are. They asked about hypocrisy and elitism. In other words, the claim that those pushing for climate change action are elitist, hypocritical, and it's all thus illegitimate. And 67% of the people agreed with that. So you can see that's really very, very encouraging. And that's why they need to have things like this where they're going to attempt to censor people like me. But of course, this is all going to fail. So the next one I'm going to look at is something from the Queensland University of Technology, their Digital Media Research Centre. And I can assure you, we've really got up these people's nose. So they talk about the Murdoch Media, News Corp, and I get 29 mentions. I seem to be living inside their brain. And they really don't like some of the things that I've been talking about. They even call me a contrarian scientist, and apparently that's bad, not seeming to realize that people like Einstein and Newton were contrarians. I'm actually feeling pretty good. Maybe, no, I'm not. But anyway, you can see what I mean, that why do they think being a contrarian is a bad thing? You actually need dissenters in science. But that's not the main reason that they're upset. They're really upset because I apparently cherry-picked data from the Australian Institute of Marine Science. This is where I look at the average coral on the whole Great Barrier Reef, which is at record amounts of coral over the last 5 years, and apparently that's somehow cherry-picking. Now, you'd think if I just looked at one little patch of coral on one little reef, well, yeah, that would be cherry-picking. But when you're doing an average for all the data on the whole Great Barrier Reef, that's sort of like picking every cherry in every tree in the whole orchard in the whole of Australia. I really can't see how that's cherry picking. But anyway, they go on and they go on, and they've got lots of my graphs and things in here as well, which is extremely encouraging that, you know, they can see that we're being extremely effective in getting across the message that the reef is fine. So they've got this interesting, some sort of visualization of all the links between all of us bad people. Now, the next one I'm going to look at is actually quite annoying because, well, it's from the Jewish Climate Network. And as you know, I'm extreme, pro-Jewish, pro-Israel and all the rest of it. So I look at this one and just shake my head, right? So we've got the Jewish Climate Network who are worried that the same people who spread disinformation and misinformation about Jews, we're also the same people who spread misinformation about climate change, and we do it in the same way. So what they're saying is this one here, that they postulate the existence of a group that secretly manipulates events for malevolent purposes. So, you know, with Jews, the Jews are supposed to control the whole world. We just never see them. And apparently that's what we do about climate misinformation. We believe that these secret people changing the whole world on the climate change thing, which is actually the exact opposite of what we say. They're in broad daylight, the CSIRO, all these government authorities, the huge banks with their literally trillions of dollars with a big sign on the front saying, climate action fund, so that they can make huge amounts of money. It's the exact opposite of the way people have said terrible things about Jews over the past. And I guess what this proves is that, my best video that I've ever done was the incredible contribution of Jews to science. And then you get this rubbish here, which just proves that there's a huge bell curve in the intelligence of the population. Now, the other one I'm going to have a look at is this one by my mate, David Forbes. Now, David Forbes is a lawyer in town. Now, remember, people like me are being claimed to be in the pay of the oil industry. So when QUT talk about these malevolent forces, they seem to forget to remember that, well, I was fired from my job, I live on my wife's superannuation, and that they're the ones, these QUT Digital Media Centre, that have got all the money, and we've got almost nothing. They've got literally billions or trillions of dollars. So my mate David Forbes, he's a lawyer in town here, he totted up, in his spare time, the amount of money just from charity groups on climate change. So this is what we got here, and we can see that these registered charities, 105 million to the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, 75 million to the Sunrise Project. He totted it all up, and it comes to somewhere in the order of 450 million just to the charities. And then you can add on to that, how much AIMS get, which is about 100 million. CSIRO, probably on climate stuff, is another 100 million. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, I'm guessing 50 to 100 million. This is just the tip of the iceberg. These people have almost 1,000 people working with them. And it's against little old me and David Forbes and, a bunch of merry men around Australia and the world who none of us are being paid. And you know what? We're winning, which is why they have to suggest that we're going to have censorship. And I think it's quite likely that they will try it, but it won't work. I mean, in my case, when I was chucked out of university, I went from being a complete unknown to people actually started to listen to me, which is the first time that had ever happened. If they start to censor people like me and Ian Plimer and all the other great skeptics around the world, people will just seek out that work, and they will find it, and it will attract a whole bunch of people to our cause. So go ahead, make my day. I think they should do that. And anyway, we can get around it. I can talk about the Great Barrier Reef in code. All I'll do is I'll talk about, rather than the amount of coral on the reef, I'll talk about how much grass is in my garden. I'll say, there's record amounts of grass in my garden. It's been higher in the last 5 years than in all the previous 40 years put together, right? And I'll be able to say, yes, the amount of grass in my garden sometimes goes down when there's a cyclone, but it grows back really, really fast. We're going to have a whole heap of fun with this if they try to go down this route. So anyway, you might think that I should be unhappy about being censored, and I must say I'm not terribly happy about that. But it's not going to work. But what it definitely shows is that we are winning.